My name is Sophia Goodwin, 39 years old, a major in the United States Army. 6 months ago, right at the family dinner table, my mother smirked and said my life and death sacrifices would never equal my brother's white lab coat. I put my fork down. I said the sentence I had been waiting 15 years to utter. My mother's face showed something I had never seen before. She looked at me like I was a stranger. I thought I was the one holding the secrets at that table. I was wrong. Someone had been lying to my mother for 5 years. Someone she trusted more than me. 6 months later, as my brother raises a glass at a charity gala, 300 people are about to learn the brutal truth I just discovered. Before we go on, do me a small favor. Hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know who's sitting at this table with me. Anyone who's ever had to be the reliable one in the family. You get the exhaustion I'm describing. Now let me take you back to that Sunday in October. The day I officially stopped pretending. The air in my parents' dining room in Ohio tasted like recycled oxygen and burnt onions. Same brass chandelier overhead, casting a piss-yellow glow that made everyone look like they were recovering from a bad fever. This room hadn't changed in 15 years. It was a museum dedicated to Michael's greatness, and I was just the ghost haunting the corner chair. My father, Richard, was hunched over his plate. He didn't look up. He just sawed through a slab of pot roast like he was trying to cut through a truck tire. Clink, scraping porcelain. That was the only soundtrack to our family, bonding. Michael sat across from me, looking every bit the golden child in a custom Italian silk shirt. He leaned back, swirling a glass of expensive Cabernet as if he were at a tasting in Napa instead of a drafty house in the suburbs. "Legacy, Mom," Michael said, his voice smooth as engine oil. "The $50,000 pledge to the hospital's heart wing. It's about putting the Goodwin name where it belongs, on the wall." Nancy, my mother, beamed. She reached over, patting his hand like he'd just returned from a holy crusade. She didn't just love Michael. She worshipped the version of him he sold her. I adjusted my sweater, drab gray, professional, invisible. I'd spent 15 years in the Army learning how to blend into the dirt so I wouldn't get shot. Turns out that training worked a little too well at home. I waited for a gap in Michael's monologue, a tactical opening. "I finalized the budget for the new medical logistics hub at the Pentagon today," I said. My voice was flat, the same tone I used for briefing generals. $18 million. It'll streamline trauma response for 3 different states. The scraping of Dad's knife stopped. For 3 seconds, the room was a vacuum. Then Nancy let out a sharp, bird-like giggle. She didn't even glance at the folder I'd placed on the table. "That's very nice, Sophia," she said, her voice dripping with that weaponized sweetness she used to keep me in my place. "But moving numbers on a spreadsheet isn't the same as real medicine. Michael actually saves lives with his hands. You're just a soldier, dear. You'll never quite be on his level." Michael gave me a smirk, half pity, half triumph. "Mom, take it easy on her. She's doing her best with what she has." The anger didn't burn. It was cold, a sheet of ice settling over my ribs. I looked at the onions on my plate, blackened, bitter. I thought about the MREs I'd eaten in desert foxholes while sending checks back to this house. I thought about the hazard pay I'd sweated for so Michael could keep his doctor image polished. Clack. I hit my fork against the edge of the porcelain. One sharp, metallic strike. The room went dead silent. "Michael," I said, locking eyes with him. I watched his Adam's apple bob. Once, twice. The telltale sign of a man who knows a bomb just landed in his lap. "Since you're so flush with $50,000 donations, you can handle the household bills from now on. I'm cutting the supply line. Starting tonight, the $3,000 a month I've been sending to your account for family care stops." Dad's knife clattered to the floor. Michael's face drained of color, turning the shade of unwashed chalk. 3,000? Nancy's eyebrows knitted together. She leaned back, looking from me to her son. The confusion on her face wasn't a mask. It was genuine. "Sophia, what are you talking about? We haven't seen a single cent from you in 5 years. I froze. I'm an intelligence officer. I track every decimal point. Since 2021, I'd funneled exactly $180,000 into the account Michael managed for our parents. I looked back at Michael. A bead of sweat was tracing a jagged line down his temple. His hands were shaking under the table, hidden from Mom, but not from me. Nancy wasn't lying. She was too arrogant for a con this big. She really didn't know. I stood up, the chair screeching like a wounded animal against the hardwood. "Wait," Michael stammered, his voice thin and reeking of panic. "Sophia, let's just—" "There's nothing to talk about," I said, my voice a serrated blade. My supply line hadn't just been cut. It had been pillaged by the person I was trying to protect. I grabbed my coat and walked out into the October chill. I didn't need an explanation. I needed my bank statements, and I needed to find out where $180,000 had really gone. The rain slammed against the windshield, a rhythmic violence that matched the thrumming in my head. I was crossing the state line into Pennsylvania, the Ohio lights fading into a wet, gray smudge in the rearview mirror. The dashboard glowed with a dim, sickly blue. It was the kind of light that made skin look translucent, like a corpse in a morgue. My hands gripped the leather steering wheel, the material cold and unforgiving beneath my palms. I wasn't just driving. I was retreating from a battlefield I had already lost. I was driving, but my brain was stuck in logistics mode, auditing, reconciling the books. $3,000 every single month for 60 months. The total was a lead weight in my gut. $180,000. I thought about the origin of that money. It wasn't just a direct deposit from some safe desk job at the Pentagon. It was hazard pay. It was money earned in nameless dirt patches where the heat felt like a physical assault and the dust tasted like old copper. I had sweated for that money. I had bled for it. I missed Christmases, funerals, and 5 years of my own life so my parents could have a new roof, decent insulin, and a furnace that didn't die every January. I remember the smell of jet fuel and burning trash, the weight of the ceramic plates in my vest, and the constant low-level vibration of a base that never slept. I did it for them. But back in Ohio, the roof was still leaking. The insulin was still a struggle. And the furnace? It was probably still rattling like a box of rusted nails in the basement. The money was gone, vaporized in Michael's Italian silk pocket. The wipers slapped back and forth. Swish thump, swish thump. My mind drifted back to 2005. I was 18. We sat in that same dining room, the one with the piss-yellow light that made everything look sickly. My parents had $40,000 left in their savings, the absolute end of the line. They didn't even ask me what I wanted for my future. They didn't have to. They just handed the check to Michael while I watched. I remember the scratch of the pen on the paper. I remember my mother's hand trembling with the pride she never wasted on me. "He's going to be a surgeon, Sophia," she had said, her voice thick with emotion. "He's the future of this family. You're strong. You'll figure it out." So, I figured it out. I walked into the recruitment office the next morning. I signed my life over to the government because the Army was the only one offering me a seat at the table. I traded my freedom for a chance to be someone they couldn't ignore. Years later, I remember Michael's white coat ceremony. The church was packed. The air smelled of expensive perfume, floor wax, and lilies. My mother wore a silk dress that cost a month of groceries, crying as Michael walked across the stage. He was the saint. He was the hero. He was the investment that paid off. Cut to 3 years ago. My promotion to major. No church, no lilies, no silk dresses. I was standing on a flat, gravel-covered parade field. The wind was so sharp it felt like it was trying to peel the skin off my forehead. My commanding officer pinned the gold leaf on my shoulder, his movements stiff and professional. A guy from the public affairs office snapped one grainy photo. That was it. I called home to tell them, and my mother didn't even acknowledge the rank. She just complained that Michael's country club fees had gone up and asked if I could send a little extra that month. I was the citizen soldier, the reliable one, the ghost in the machine. I pull into a rest stop off the turnpike. It's one of those bleak, concrete slabs that smells like diesel fumes and wet pavement. I step out, the cold air biting through my thin sweater. My boots crunch on the salt-stained asphalt. I walk inside, my back straight, my eyes scanning the room out of habit. Checking exits, gauging threats. The lady behind the counter doesn't even look up from her phone. I buy a black coffee. It's bitter, burnt, and served in a thin paper cup that's already leaking at the seam. I lean against the cold glass of the window, watching the trucks roar by on the interstate. In the Army, we have a saying, embrace the suck. I've been embracing it for 15 years. I thought my family was my safe harbor. But to them, I wasn't a daughter or a sister. I was an ATM with a uniform, a source of free duty. They didn't respect the sacrifice, they just expected the deposit. They saw my rank as a paycheck, not a badge of honor. My phone buzzes on the metal table. A Washington, D.C. area code. It's Helena Vaughn. She's a heavy hitter at the Hospital Foundation, the kind of woman who talks in exclamation points and gala invitations. Sophia, darling. Her voice crackles through the speaker. I am so glad I caught you. We are so excited for the event next month. Having a major represent the Department of Defense is it's the prestige we need. I'll be there, Helena, I say. My voice is steady, professional. Wonderful, and I have even better news. Your brother, Michael, what an absolute angel. He just finalized his pledge. $250,000 for the new surgical theater. We're engraving the Goodwin name in the marble next week. It's going to be stunning. I sipped the burnt coffee. It felt like acid in my throat. $250,000. A man who stole his sister's combat pay to keep his parents' lights on is now buying immortality with money he doesn't have. He's taking my sweat and turning it into marble. He's engraving his lie into the side of a building. He wants the world to see the golden child, while I pay for the polish. If you've ever felt like the invisible one, the one who carries the weight while someone else takes the credit, hit that like button. Subscribe now because this isn't just my story, it's for everyone who is tired of being the reliable one. Drop a major in the comments if you've ever had to fight your own battles while the golden child got the parade. Let me know you're out there standing with me. The coffee cup crumples in my hand. The heat seeps through the paper, stinging my fingers. I don't feel the pain. I only feel the focus. Michael thinks he's getting a name on a wall. He thinks he's won. He thinks the reliable one will just keep driving, keep paying, and keep quiet. He's forgotten one thing. I'm not just his sister. I'm a logistics officer. And I've just identified the target. Objective: total destruction. I toss the empty cup into the trash. The target isn't just locked, it's marked for erasure. My brother wants his name on a wall. I'm going to make sure they use it for the obituary of his career instead. This isn't a family dispute anymore. This is a siege, and I brought all the ammunition. Monday morning at the Pentagon did not feel like the movies. There were no sleek glass walls or high-tech holograms. It was just the smell of industrial floor wax, the low electric hum of cooling fans, and 1,000 gray cubicles that felt like a maze for the soul. I walked down the hall of the Criminal Investigation Division, my back straight, my heels hitting the linoleum with a rhythmic snap. I did not look at the people passing by. I was in mission mode. Marcus Webb sat behind a desk that looked like it was made of surplus tank parts. He was a man of cold angles and permanent frowns, his skin the color of an old leather boot. He pushed his reading glasses up his nose as I dropped my military ID on the desk. "Major Goodwin," he rumbled. His voice sounded like gravel in a blender. "I heard you were back from the sand. You looking for a job or a headache?" "I'm looking for an audit, Marcus," I said. I did not sit. I stood there, eyes locked on his, hands behind my back. "I need a full sweep of my payroll account. Every recurring transfer to an authorized account belonging to Michael Goodwin over the last 60 months. Marcus leaned back, his chair groaning under the weight. He rubbed a hand over his buzzed scalp. "That is family, Sophia. You open this file, CID does not just close it because you realize it gets ugly. We are talking about a doctor, a civilian hero." "He is a target, Marcus," I told him. My voice was a flat line. "I also want a deep dive on a specific pledge. $250,000 to a hospital heart wing in Ohio. Find out if that money is real or if it is just a ghost in a press release. Marcus looked at me for a long, quiet minute. He knew that look. It was the stare of a soldier who had realized the enemy was wearing her own colors. He turned to his keyboard. The clack, clack, clack of the keys was the only sound in the sterile room. Sharp, fast, like a drumbeat before a charge. I will have it by Friday. I need it by Wednesday, I said. Then start praying, Major. Wednesday night was a different kind of cold. I sat in my apartment in Virginia, the lights off, the only glow coming from the street lamps outside reflecting off the window. I called Ohio. I had to know if the fortress was still standing. Nancy answered on the third ring. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the silence like a jagged piece of glass. Sophia, I thought you would be too busy with your logistics to check on your mother, she said. No hello, just a jab. I'm checking on the house, Mom, I said. I rubbed the bridge of my nose, feeling the grit of a 16-hour day. How is the roof? The leaks? Oh, the roof is perfect, she said, her voice softening into that sweet, poisonous tone she kept for my brother. Michael came over last week. He took one look at it and just took care of it. He said a surgeon cannot have his parents living under a tarp. He paid for the whole thing, $18,000, out of his own pocket. I stopped breathing. The phone felt like a block of ice against my ear. $18,000. That was the exact amount of my hazard pay from the May deployment, the money I had sent specifically to fix that roof so they would be safe through the winter. I had spent months in the heat, counting every penny, thinking I was the protector. And Michael had walked in, used my cash, and took the credit. That is great, Mom, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He's a real hero. He is, she snapped. You should try being more like him instead of always playing with your spreadsheets. I hung up. I stood there in the dark, the silence of the room feeling like a physical weight. My own mother was using my sacrifice to bury me. She was protecting a ghost. By Friday afternoon, I was in Chicago. The wind was whipping off the lake, cutting through my coat like a razor. I sat in a corner booth of a dim cafe, the smell of burnt beans and old grease hanging heavy in the air. Lauren was already there. Michael's ex-wife looked like she had been through a meat grinder. Her eyes were hollow, her hair pulled back in a knot that looked painful. She did not say hello. She just shoved a thick brown accordion file across the wood table. I am only doing this because he is going to ruin my daughter's life next, she said. Her voice was raspy, dry. I pulled the file closer. I did not look at her. I opened it. The crinkle of the paper was loud in the quiet cafe. I started flipping. Bank statements, credit card bills, tax returns. It was a map of a man's rot. Look at the Delaware accounts, Lauren whispered. She was leaning forward, her hands white at the knuckles. Look at the dates. I found the column. My eyes tracked the numbers. Every month, on the 3rd, $3,000 landed in Michael's account from the Department of Defense. My money, my life. And every month, on the 4th, that exact amount was wired to a gambling site in Delaware, a sports book, betting on games. It was not just the $3,000. He had taken a second mortgage. He was a black hole. I felt a wave of acid hit my throat. I had been in the sand, dodging fire, thinking I was a lifeline, but I was just a battery. Michael had plugged himself into my life and was draining me dry to feed a sickness. He has been doing it for years, Sophia, Lauren said, a single tear tracking through the dust on her cheek. I closed the file. The thud on the wood sounded like a coffin lid closing. Thank you, Lauren, I said. I stood up, grabbing the file. What are you going to do? She asked. I looked at her. I did not smile. I am going to cut the supply line, and then I'm going to burn the house down. I walked out into the wind. I had a target. I had the ledger. Michael wanted his name on a wall. I was going to make sure the only place it appeared was on a subpoena. The war was coming home. 9:47 p.m., Thursday. My apartment in Boston felt like a hollowed-out concrete shell. I didn't turn on the heat. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat there in the shadows, watching the harsh blue glow of the computer monitor bleed into the dark room. My eyes were burning, raw from hours of staring, but I couldn't stop scrolling. Marcus had finally sent the encrypted file. It was the digital autopsy of a 15-year betrayal. I clicked through the lines of the audit. 187 transactions. Every single click felt like a bullet hitting home. $94,000. Gone. Flushed directly into the gutter of sports betting sites in Delaware, DraftKings, FanDuel. A never-ending list of parlays and desperation bets that never paid out. $38,000. Vanished. Sucked into a crypto exchange that had gone dark months ago. And my parents? The people I had been selling my years and my sanity for? They had received exactly $0. No medical visits for Dad's failing eyes, no new furnace to keep the Ohio winter at bay, no insulin for Mom. They were dying on the vine while Michael used their survival fund as his personal plaything. The money I had earned in the mud, under the sun that tried to kill me, had been used to buy my brother's cheap thrills. I was the provider, and he was the parasite. I stood up. My joints felt like rusted iron, stiff and unyielding. I walked to the kitchen and reached for the bottle of bourbon on the counter. I didn't bother with a glass. I just drank it straight from the neck. The burn was honest. It hit my throat and reminded me that I was still standing. I welcomed the fire. 2:14 a.m. I was back at the screen when the notification chirped. A final email from Lauren. Just one attachment, no text. I opened it. It was a screenshot of a text Michael had sent to some guy named Doug. Midnight, Wednesday. My sister thinks she's buying insulin for the old lady. Haha. The word haha was a white-hot brand on the screen. It was blinding. I didn't feel the familiar sting of sadness. I didn't even feel the heat of anger. I felt something far more dangerous. The emotional firewall I'd built around my family for 15 years didn't just crack, it disintegrated. At the front, I had taken fire for men who didn't know my middle name. I had carried gear until my knees screamed and my lungs felt like they were full of broken glass. I had done it all because I believed that back home, there was something worth the sacrifice. But I wasn't the protector. I was the punchline. I was the biggest sucker at the table. I grabbed my field jacket. I didn't look in the mirror. I walked out into the Boston night. 11 degrees Celsius. The air was a razor against my skin. I walked along the banks of the Charles River, watching the black water churn like liquid obsidian beneath the bridges. My breath came out in sharp, ragged puffs of white smoke. My heart wasn't a sister's heart anymore. It was a tactical operations center. Martial law. No more negotiations. No more mercy. Saturday night. The bar was a hole-in-the-wall dive near the city center, the kind of place where the floor is always damp and the music is always a half-second offbeat. It smelled of stale beer, old grease, and regret. I sat in a corner booth, my back against the cold brick wall. I waited. Michael arrived 20 minutes late. He looked like a wreck. His designer shirt was wrinkled at the collar. His hair was a mess of unwashed grease. He smelled like a distillery from 3 feet away. He tried to give me that golden child smile, but the corners were twitching. I didn't say hello. I didn't ask how he was doing. I pushed a thick, gray envelope across the sticky, scarred wood of the table. It landed in a puddle of spilled gin. "You have 48 hours, Michael," I said. My voice was low, cutting through the bass of the music like a knife through soft meat. He glanced at the envelope, but didn't touch it. 48 hours for what, Sophia? You're acting like we're in a damn movie. Relax. Have a drink on me. Pull the $250,000 pledge, I said. Call Helena Vaughn. Tell her it's a mistake. Tell her you're a fraud. Do it by Monday night, or I pull the pin. Michael leaned back, the vinyl of the booth screeching. He didn't look scared. He looked amused. He threw his head back and let out a loud, wet laugh that made the patrons at the next table turn around. "You're pathetic," he said, leaning in close. His breath was hot and sour with alcohol. "You really think you can scare me? You're just the angry soldier sister." Mom has been telling me how jealous you've been since you were 8 years old. You always wanted what I had, the brains, the respect, the love. He stood up, looking down at me with pure, unadulterated contempt. Go back to your barracks, Sophia. Mom and Dad will never believe a word you say. They need me. You? You're just the person who sends the checks. And you're going to keep sending them because you're too weak to walk away. He turned around and walked out into the crowd without looking back. He didn't even pay for the drink he had ordered. The waitress came by a minute later. She dropped a slip of paper on the table. $12. I took a 10 and 2 singles out of my wallet. I placed them neatly on top of the bill. I smoothed out the corners of the bills until they were perfectly aligned. My hands didn't shake. I didn't leave. I sat there for another 10 minutes, watching the door. My brother was right about one thing. I had been weak. I had been a reliable ghost, but the ghost was gone. I took out my phone and dialed Marcus. Do it, I said. You sure, Major? Once the report hits the hospital board, there's no going back. This is scorched earth. Mark the target, I said. Objective, total destruction. I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and walked out. The war wasn't in the desert anymore. It was right here. And Michael had no idea I just brought the entire heavy artillery unit to his front door. 12 hours from Boston to Ohio. I didn't turn on the radio once. The only sound was the steady, low-frequency hum of tires on the asphalt and the occasional rattle of the dashboard when the road got rough. The car cabin was a pressurized vault, an isolation zone where the air felt thick with what I was about to do. I watched the miles tick down on the digital clock. Each mile felt like a tactical maneuver. My mind was locked into mission mode. The emotions were checked at the state line. I pulled into the hotel parking lot late. The air smelled like rain and wet pavement. Inside the room, I hung the charcoal crepe wool dress on the back of the closet door. It wasn't a dress for a party. It was camouflage, a uniform for a night that was going to be anything but celebratory. I stared at it for a long time. No bright colors, no sequins. Just a muted, dark shadow. I didn't put on red lipstick. I didn't do anything to stand out. I just fastened a pair of pearl earrings, the ones that belonged to my grandmother. They were the only real thing in a family full of counterfeits. I looked at myself in the mirror. The lighting was harsh, overhead. The woman staring back wasn't the one who had cried over a dinner table 6 months ago. That version of me was dead. This was a cleanup crew of one. 6 p.m. The ballroom at the hotel was a cathedral of American middle-class vanity. Crystal chandeliers hung low, casting a glittering fake light over 300 guests. White linen tablecloths, expensive centerpieces, the smell of high-end catering and too much hairspray. My mother, Nancy, intercepted me near the entrance. She smelled of stale floral perfume and desperation. Her hand gripped my forearm with a strength that surprised me. Her eyes were darting around the room, checking to see if anyone was watching. Don't make a scene tonight, Sophia, she hissed. Her voice was a jagged whisper. Please. For once, just let your brother have his moment. Don't do this to us. Michael appeared right behind her. He looked like he had aged 10 years since Boston. A thin film of sweat sat on his upper lip, and his silk tie looked like it was choking him. He tried to give me that practiced, golden child smile, but it was twitching at the corners. Hey, sis, he said, his voice forced. He sounded like he was trying to swallow a mouthful of dry sand. Let's just keep things calm tonight, okay? We're family. Let's act like it. They were both trying to shove the rotting corpse of the truth under the table. They wanted to pretend the smell didn't exist. I didn't answer. I just pulled my arm back and walked past them. Dinner was an exercise in endurance. I sat in the designated seat, my back straight, my posture perfect. I kept my hands folded on my lap beneath the table. I didn't touch the salad. I didn't touch the bread. I wouldn't take a single bite of the food Michael's lies had paid for. Around me, the room was a roar of 300 voices. Small talk, clinking glasses, laughter that sounded like breaking glass. Michael was at the center of it all. He was halfway through his 11th glass of wine, telling that same tired story about the patient who gifted him a crate of pears. He played the part of the selfless doctor perfectly. The guests leaned in, hanging on every word. I watched him from 3 feet away. I didn't see a hero. I saw a man who had gambled away his mother's health for a parlay bet in Delaware. 3 steps down the table, my father, Richard, was silent. He hadn't said a word to anyone. He was focused entirely on his steak, cutting it into tiny, precise squares. Scrape, clink. The sound of his knife against the porcelain was the only honest noise at the table. He didn't look at Michael. He didn't look at Nancy. He looked like a man who had finally realized he was sitting in a burning house and had run out of water. The air in the ballroom was getting heavier. The saving face culture of the Midwest was in full swing. Everyone knew something was wrong, but everyone was committed to the lie. It was a suffocating, collective agreement to ignore the rot. 7:58 p.m. Helena Vaughn stood up and walked toward the podium. The feedback from the microphone gave a sharp, metallic screech. The room went quiet. My mother started to fidget with her napkin, her eyes wide and panicked. She kept glancing at the gray envelope I had placed on the table next to my water glass. It was sitting there like an unexploded ordnance. Nancy leaned toward my father, her voice trembling. "Richard, do something. She has that envelope. Tell her to put it away." My father stopped cutting his meat. He laid the knife and fork down side by side, perfectly parallel. For the first time in 30 years, he looked up. He didn't look at my mother. He looked straight at me, across the centerpiece of ranunculus and ferns. His eyes were clear. There was no more fog. No more NHI. No humans involved. He saw me. He saw the major. He saw the daughter he had let become a ghost. His voice came out low, gravelly, and steady. A sound that cut through Nancy's frantic breathing. "Let her talk, Nancy." The room felt like it was losing oxygen. Helena Vaughn cleared her throat at the microphone. My mother gasped, her hand going to her throat. Michael froze, his wineglass halfway to his mouth. The fuse was lit. 8:12 p.m. The air in the ballroom was a thick, stagnant sludge of expensive cologne and cheap lies. Helena Vaughn stepped toward the microphone. Her voice rang out, practiced and professional. A polished tool used to solicit money from people who wanted to feel important. "To represent the Department of Defense tonight, we are honored to have Major Sophia Goodwin," she announced. I stood. I didn't rush. I didn't smooth out the charcoal crepe of my dress. I just moved. My heels hit the hardwood steps of the stage with a flat, hollow crack, the sound of a hammer driving a nail into a casket. The spotlight swung toward me, a blinding white eye that stripped away the shadows. I walked onto the stage, 300 faces blurred into a sea of expectation, their eyes hungry for a hero story they could applaud. Underneath the harsh lights, Michael looked like a man who had already been buried. His skin was the color of unwashed porcelain. Dead, glassy eyes. He was slumped in his chair, his hands hidden under the white tablecloth, likely trembling. I didn't look at the paper in my hand. I didn't need a script for a death sentence. I looked at Nancy. She was clutching her pearls so hard her knuckles were white stones. The microphone gave a low-frequency hiss as I leaned in. The smell of dust and warm metal hit my nose. "I want to correct one line in tonight's program," I said. My voice was steady. It wasn't the voice of a sister. It was the voice of a major delivering a mission report to a room full of corpses. The $250,000 matching donation attributed to Dr. Michael Goodwin? It does not exist. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum before the air rushes back in. Then the murmurs started. A low, ugly rumble of confusion. Michael's head dropped. He looked like his neck had just snapped under the weight of the spotlight. "The compliance office has verified that no such pledge was ever made," I continued, my words cutting through the room like a serrated blade. "The bank accounts associated with the Goodwin name are empty. The information will be removed from the record immediately. The hospital will not be built on a fiction." Nancy's hand went to her mouth. I could see the terror in her eyes. Not for what her son had done, but because the world was finally seeing the rot beneath the silk shirt. I didn't stop. I hadn't come here to warn them. I'd come to finish the job. Second, for the last 60 months, I've funneled $3,000 every month from my combat pay into a joint account. It was intended for the medical care of my parents. It never reached them. I paused. I wanted every person in that room to taste the grit of that sentence. I wanted them to see the sand of the desert, where I earned that money compared to the gold leaf on the ballroom walls. A federal audit has documented the embezzlement of these funds, I said. $180,000. My sweat, my life. It was moved into gambling accounts in Delaware. My parents were not cared for. They were used as a front for a thief who hid behind a doctor's title. 4 paragraphs, 4 minutes, 15 years of the golden child mythology turned into gray ash right there on the stage. I watched the realization hit the crowd. The respect Michael had spent a decade building didn't just fade, it evaporated. I stepped back from the podium. The metal of the mic was cold against my fingers. This organization should be funded by honesty, not the blood of soldiers. Thank you. I reached out and clicked the mic off. Thud. The sound echoed through the hall, a final door closing. I left the gray envelope on the wood and walked back down the steps. My back was a straight line. My heels didn't falter. The silence lasted for 4 seconds, long enough for the reality to sink into the carpet. Then a man in the back stood up. A veteran, judging by the way he held his shoulders. He didn't say a word. He just started to clap. One pair of hands, clap, then another joined in. Clap, clap. Suddenly, the room exploded. A roar of applause that felt like a physical shockwave. It wasn't for the golden child. It was for the truth. Michael didn't wait for the end. He shoved his chair back, the metal legs screeching against the floor like a scream. He bolted for the service exit, his head down, the hero running like a rat in a tuxedo. Lauren sat perfectly still at our table. She looked at me as I approached. She didn't smile, but she gave me a single, slow nod of recognition. Mission accomplished. The supply line was officially dead. If you have ever felt the weight of a secret that wasn't yours to keep, or if you have finally found the courage to speak your truth when the world tried to quiet you, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel right now to see what happens when the golden child runs out of places to hide. Drop the word justice in the comments if you have ever had to stand up and reclaim your own name. I want to know who is out there standing on that stage with me tonight. I didn't look back at the stage. I walked toward the lobby, the noise of the applause fading behind the heavy oak doors. But the night wasn't over. Michael was in the hallway. He was trapped between the service elevator and the truth, and he still had my father's name in his mouth. The oak doors swung shut, cutting the roar of the applause into a muffled, distant thrum. The service corridor was a different world. Cold, sterile. It smelled of industrial-grade bleach and the sharp, sour tang of high-octane fear. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a flickering, sickly buzz that made everything look jagged and raw. I didn't stop to catch my breath. I didn't need to. My heart rate was a steady 60 beats per minute, mission clock still running. I turned the corner and found him. Michael was pinned against the cinder block wall between 2 security guards, big men with thick necks and the bored eyes of ex-cops who had seen it all. Michael's $5,000 Italian suit was a wreck. The silk was dark with sweat under the armpits. His tie was yanked to the side like a noose. He looked like a high-end junkie who had just been told the stash was empty. When he saw me, his face twisted into something primal, something ugly. "You're dead, Sophia," he spat. His voice was a frantic, high-pitched rasp that echoed off the concrete. "You killed her. Do you hear me? You saw her face in there. You destroyed Mom. Everything she believed in, you just burned it to the ground for a goddamn ego trip." I stopped 3 feet from him. I didn't move a muscle. I just crossed my arms over the charcoal wool of my dress. I stood straight. The way I stood when a general walked into the room. Michael was vibrating, his hands twitching in the guard's grip. Sweat was carving jagged lines through the expensive foundation he used to hide his age. "No, Michael," I said. My voice was low, flat, a dead calm that seemed to shove his screaming back down his throat. I didn't destroy her. I just stopped paying the subscription fee for your lies. You're the one who pulled the trigger. I just stopped wearing the vest for you. He slumped. The fight went out of his legs, and the guards had to tighten their grip to keep him upright. The bravado evaporated, replaced by a desperate, wet-eyed panic. He started babbling. He looked at me, and for a second I saw the little boy who used to hide behind my back when he broke Dad's tools. But that boy was gone, replaced by a thief in a tuxedo. "Sophia, please," he whimpered. The tears were real now, but they weren't for Mom. They were for the life he was losing. "Think about Lauren. Think about my daughter. If this hits the papers, I'm done. The medical board, Lauren will take her and leave. I'll have nothing. Please, just go back in there. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them the audit was wrong. I'll pay you back. Every cent. I swear on my life." I looked at him. I saw the greed. I saw the smallness. I saw the man who had joked about buying the old lady's insulin while he bet my life's blood on a football game. "You don't get it, do you?" I leaned in, just enough so he could see the cold, gray steel in my eyes. "You don't get to choose which debts I forgive, Michael. You've been spending my life for 15 years. Tonight the bill finally came due, and you're bankrupt." I turned my back on him. I didn't wait for his response. I didn't need it. I walked away, the sound of his sobbing fading behind me, replaced by the heavy, rhythmic thud of my own heels on the floor. I found them in the small green room behind the stage. The silence in there was heavier than the noise in the ballroom. Nancy was sitting on a low velvet sofa, looking like a discarded rag doll. Her hair was a mess. Her mascara had traveled in dark, ugly streaks down her cheeks, staining the lace of her collar. She looked 80 years old. "Is it true, Sophia?" she whispered. Her voice was thin, brittle, like dried leaves catching in the wind. "The money. Michael, is it all true?" I didn't go to her. I didn't offer a hand. I just stood by the door and gave a single, sharp nod. "Every word," I said. She let out a sound then, a low, wounded animal whimper. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with a grief she had spent decades trying to avoid. Then something happened that I hadn't seen in 30 years. Richard stood up. He didn't look at the floor. He didn't reach for a glass. He walked over to the closet, pulled out Nancy's heavy black wool coat, and draped it over her shaking shoulders. He didn't hesitate. He looked like the man I remembered from before Michael became the golden child. He looked like a father. He reached down, took Nancy's hand, and pulled her to her feet. "Let's go, Nancy," he said. His voice was gravelly, deep, and final. "The truth is out in the light now. There's no more room for hiding in this house. We're going home." He led her past me. As he reached the door, he stopped. He didn't say a word. He just placed a heavy, calloused hand on my shoulder for 2 seconds. A silent recognition of the soldier I had become. Then they were gone. 3 days later. Boston. The harbor was a sheet of hammered lead under a bruised purple sky. The wind was whipping off the water, smelling of salt and old iron. I was standing by the window of my office, a cup of black coffee getting cold in my hand. My phone buzzed. Private number, Ohio. I picked it up. "Sophia." It was Richard. His voice was raspy, broken by 30 years of silence and 1,000 unspoken regrets. "I'm proud of you, kid," he said. The words were heavy, like stones being dropped into deep water. I should have said it 30 years ago. I let the silence win. But I'm going to say it every day until you believe me. You're a Goodwin. And you're the best of us. I looked out at the gray water. My throat felt like it was full of rusted wire. My eyes burned, but I didn't let the moisture fall. Soldiers don't cry over late arrivals. We just acknowledge the reinforcement and hold the line. "Thanks, Dad," I said. I hung up the phone. I looked at the horizon. The dominoes were still falling in Ohio. Michael's world was ending. But here, by the water, for the first time in 15 years, the air felt clean. The war wasn't over, but the siege was broken. I turned away from the window. My desk was piled with new reports, new missions. But the gray envelope was gone. Michael had no more cards to play. Now it was time to see what happens when the golden child finally has to face the winter alone. May in Ohio arrived with a deceptive warmth, but for Michael, the atmosphere was clinical and freezing. Institutional justice in the United States doesn't move with the speed of a bullet. It moves with the crushing weight of a glacier. It's slow, it's loud, and it's final. I didn't have to lift a finger. Once the thread was pulled in that ballroom, the entire fabric of Michael's manufactured life began to unravel with a sickening, rhythmic precision. The first blow came from the state medical board. It wasn't a dramatic trial. It was a cold room, a stenographer's clicking keys, and a stack of betting ledgers from Delaware. They didn't care about his golden child status or his expensive silk ties. They cared about the fact that he was placing $300 parlays on the NBA while he was supposed to be monitoring post-op patients. Ethics violations, gross misconduct, fraud. By the middle of the month, his license was revoked. Not suspended, revoked. I heard about the hospital through Lauren. They didn't make a public statement. They just sent a janitor with a screwdriver and a bucket of putty. The brass plaque on the wall of the heart wing, the one Michael had bragged about, was gone by noon. The Goodwin name was scraped off the directory. He wasn't a surgeon anymore. He was a liability, a ghost in a lab coat that no longer fit. By June, the legal dominoes started hitting the floor. The sports book in Delaware didn't accept excuses. They wanted their $340,000. They filed a civil suit that stripped the paint off his bank accounts. Then came the foreclosure notice on the house with the manicured lawn. The house my combat pay had indirectly kept afloat for years. Lauren didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just went to a domestic relations court in Chicago and filed for a contested divorce. She didn't just want out, she wanted the remnants. She got a protective order, full custody of their daughter, and a freeze on every joint asset Michael hadn't already gambled away. The man who used to look down at my boots and tell me I didn't understand the real world was now a man without a zip code. I watched it all from Boston. I read the legal alerts. I saw the bank notifications. I didn't call him. I didn't send a "I told you so" text. In the Army, when the enemy's position is collapsing under its own weight, you don't waste ammunition. You just hold the perimeter and watch the dust settle. Michael had built a kingdom on the blood of a soldier, and now the foundation was returning to the dirt. The end of June brought the ultimate irony. Michael ran out of friends. He ran out of credit. He ran out of places to hide. I got the report from a neighbor back home. He didn't arrive in a luxury SUV. He arrived in a battered rental car with 3 mismatched suitcases and a face that looked like it had been chewed on by regret. He moved back into my parents' house, but he didn't get the guest suite. He moved into my old bedroom, the tiny cramped box at the end of the hall. The room my mother had forced me to clear out years ago so Michael could store his old college junk and medical textbooks. She had repainted it a pale, sickly blue, the color of a cheap hospital gown. It was cold in the winter and sweltering in the summer. It was the room where I had been made to feel like a guest in my own home. Now, the golden child was a prisoner in the very space he had helped push me out of. Every morning, he had to wake up and look at the blue walls of my childhood, knowing that the only reason he had a roof over his head was because our father was too tired to kick him out. He was back at the starting line, 40 years old and utterly gutted. Friday night. Boston. The city was humming outside my window, a low-frequency vibration of traffic and sirens. I was in my kitchen. The lights were dimmed. The only sound was the rhythmic, soft hiss of the tea kettle. I wasn't drinking bourbon tonight. I didn't need the fire. My phone buzzed on the granite countertop. Nancy Goodwin. No caller ID, just the name. I let it ring. Once, twice, 5 times. She didn't leave a voicemail. She never did. A voicemail required her to state her needs out loud, and Nancy preferred the weaponized silence of a missed call. She wanted me to call back. She wanted to tell me how Michael was suffering. She wanted to ask for one more loan to help with the lawyers. I looked at the screen until the light faded to black. I poured the hot water over a bag of chamomile tea. The steam rose in a gentle cloud, smelling of earth and honey. I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic mug. My grip was steady. No tremors, no tension in my shoulders. I wasn't a logistics officer for a family of thieves anymore. I was a major in the United States Army, and my borders were officially closed. I had spent 15 years fighting a war on two fronts, one in the desert and one in this kitchen. Tonight, the peace treaty was signed by the silence of my phone. Michael was in the blue room, facing the wreckage of his own making. Nancy was in the living room, staring at the empty seat where her hero used to sit. And I was here, in the quiet, finally owning the air I breathed. The kettle gave one last dying whistle as it cooled. I took a sip of the tea. It was bitter, but it was clean. The phone buzzed again, a text message this time. No, haha at the end. Just a single sentence from my mother that made the tea go cold in my mouth. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes. The war wasn't over. It was just changing shape. The law office in downtown Boston smelled of lemon polish and old, expensive paper. It was a silent place, tucked away from the scream of the wind coming off the harbor. I sat across from a man named Miller, a trust attorney with a face like a sharpening stone and a handshake that felt like a closing trap. On the mahogany desk between us sat the paperwork for the Goodwin Medical Trust. The radiator in the corner hissed, a rhythmic mechanical breath that filled the gaps in our conversation. I picked up the fountain pen. It was heavy, real weight. I signed my name at the bottom of the 16th page. The ink was black, wet, and final. Everything is set, Major, Miller said, his voice as dry as a desert floor. The $5,000 monthly deposit is automated. The bills from the Ohio facility go directly to my office. Your parents don't touch the cash. Michael doesn't touch the cash. And if anyone tries to contest the fiduciary structure, they deal with me. I leaned back, my spine a straight line against the leather chair. I didn't smile. I didn't feel the warmth of charity. I felt the cold satisfaction of a fortified perimeter. In the Army, you don't just win a hill, you dig in. You string the wire. You set the claymores. This was my wire. Make sure he knows, I said. Every time he looks at a grocery receipt or a pharmacy bill, I want him to see your firm's letterhead. I want him to know the money is coming from the sister he called a sucker. He knows, Miller replied, tucking the documents into a thick folder. I sent the formal notice to the house yesterday. Your brother tried to call the office 6 times this morning. My paralegal didn't even put him through. He's blocked Sophia, hard blocked. I walked out of the office into the biting Boston air. The sky was the color of a bruised lung, gray and heavy. I didn't go back to my apartment. I drove. I needed the hum of the engine to clear the static in my head. Sunday morning. The call came while I was at a diner, staring at a plate of cold eggs and a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. I saw the Ohio area code on the screen. Nancy. I let it ring 4 times before I pressed the button. I didn't say hello, I just waited. The silence on the other end was different this time. No frantic excuses, no sharp jabs about my attitude, just a ragged, wet sound. The sound of a woman who had finally run out of lies to tell herself. I read the statement, Sophia, my mother said. Her voice was thin, cracked at the edges. I could hear the faint drone of a vacuum cleaner in the background. She was cleaning. She always cleaned when the shame got too loud. The Delaware logs, the dates, the amounts. I saw what he did with the roof money. I didn't offer her a bridge. I didn't say it was okay. I just watched a truck roll past the diner window, its tires throwing up a spray of gray slush. I'm sorry, she whispered. The words sounded like they were being dragged over broken glass. I wanted a doctor's son so badly. I wanted the respect, the status. I was so busy looking at the white coat that I didn't see the blood on your hands from keeping us alive. Your father was right. I turned you into a shadow so Michael could pretend he was the sun. I failed you, Sophia. The admission hit me with the force of a low-velocity round. It didn't kill, but it burned. I gripped the edge of the laminate table until my knuckles turned white. For 15 years, I'd waited for those words. Now that they were here, they felt like old news. "You did, Mom," I said. My voice was a flat line, no tremor. "But the shadow is gone. I'm the one holding the keys now. If Michael needs a dime, if he needs a lawyer, if he needs a pack of cigarettes, tell him he has to call me. He has to ask his sister for the payout. Let's see how much he likes the taste of his own medicine." Nancy didn't argue. She didn't defend him. She just let out a long, shaky breath. "He won't call. He's too proud. He just sits in that blue room with the door locked." "Good," I said. "Let him get used to the walls. They're the same ones I looked at while I was saving for your house." I hung up. I felt a strange, heavy peace. It wasn't the warmth of a hug. It was the quiet of a graveyard after the last shovelful of dirt is thrown. The family I knew was dead. A new, colder version was taking its place. December arrived with a blizzard that shut down the city. I was in my apartment, watching the snow pile up on the windowsill, when an email popped up on my laptop. Helena Vaughn. Subject: The Wall. I opened the attachment. It was a high-resolution photo of the lobby at the Ohio Cardiac Wing. The lighting was soft, golden. In the center of the wall, where the old fraudulent plaque had once hung, was a new piece of cast bronze. The edges were sharp. The finish was matte. I zoomed in. 3 names were etched into the metal, deep and permanent. Richard Goodwin, Nancy Goodwin, Major Sophia Goodwin. No Michael. Not even a space for him. The history of the family had been edited. The grifter had been erased, and the soldier had been recorded in stone. I stared at the word Major next to my name. It was the only title in that house that had been earned with sweat and grit. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. The snow was falling faster now, erasing the streets of Boston, turning the world into a blank slate. I felt the weight of the last 15 years lift, not into the air, but into the ground. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in a long time. "Marcus," I said when he picked up. "The Goodwin mission is over. I need a new deployment, somewhere far away, somewhere with a clear line of sight." The war at home was won. But as I looked at the dark water of the harbor, I realized that for a soldier like me, the peace was the hardest part to survive. The phone buzzed one last time, a message from an unknown number. "I'm not done yet, sis." I didn't delete it. I just looked at the screen until it went dark. The wire was strung. The claymores were set. Let him come. 39 years old. That is the number on my personnel file now. I am sitting in a small Stark kitchen in Virginia, just a few miles outside the main gate of the base. It is Saturday morning. The sun is a flat, sharp blade of gold cutting across the dark granite countertop. It is quiet here. Not the heavy, suffocating quiet of a house packed with secrets, but the clean, hollow silence of a vacancy. There is no shouting, no slamming of heavy oak doors, no frantic mid-morning phone calls about missed mortgage payments or hidden gambling debts. I paid for this silence. The currency was 15 years of my youth, 100 gallons of sweat in the Iraqi sand, and a cold, surgical audit that stripped my family's lies down to the bone. It was expensive. It cost me the mother I thought I had and the brother I tried to save. But standing here, watching the dust motes dance in the light, I know it was a bargain. The coffee grinder hums a low mechanical tune. It is the only noise in the apartment. I make the coffee black, strong, bitter enough to remind me that I'm awake and that the world is still solid. I set the mug down on a square white coaster and perform the most important ritual of my new life. I take my phone and I flip it over, face down. The screen goes black against the stone. The world is on the other side of that glass, and it no longer has a key to my front door. Even if the Pentagon sends a high-priority alert, even if Nancy leaves a jagged, tear-filled message about Michael's latest breakdown in that sickly blue room back in Ohio. They wait. Everything waits. I take a slow sip. The heat scalds my tongue. The bitterness hits first, sharp and unforgiving. But the aftertaste is clean. It is the flavor of absolute autonomy. I am the commanding officer of this square footage. My borders are officially closed. No unauthorized entry, no exceptions for blood or birthright. I look at my hands. They are steady. There is no tremor from the years of holding up a crumbling house, no tension in the shoulders. In the Army, they teach you how to manage logistics for a battalion. They teach you how to move fuel, food, and ammunition across a desert under fire. But they never give you a manual on how to stop a leech from draining your own soul. If you are listening to this, and you feel that familiar, cold itch between your shoulder blades, that feeling that you are being hunted by the very people who are supposed to be your sanctuary, listen close. Do not wait for them to see you. Do not spend another decade holding your breath, hoping they will finally notice the scars you earned while carrying their weight. They will not. They are too busy staring at their own reflections in the mirrors you paid for. Waiting for an apology from a narcissist is like waiting for rain in a salt flat. It is a slow death by dehydration. Being polite to the rot in your own living room is not a virtue. It is complicity. It is helping the enemy dig the trench. You do not have to burn the whole world down to be free. You just have to build a fence that is higher than their reach. You have to be willing to be the villain in their pathetic story so you can be the survivor in your own. The morning air through the screen door smells of pine needles and the distant metallic scent of jet exhaust from the runway. It is the smell of a life in motion. Back in Ohio, the air is stagnant. It smells of dust and old books and the sour resentment of a man who realized too late that the world stopped buying his act. I think of the bronze plaque on that hospital wall. I can still feel the cold, matte finish of the metal under my fingertips. It is a heavy thing, that truth. But it is solid. It is the anchor that keeps me from drifting back into the fog of their expectations. Most soldiers do not get the medal when they actually deserve it. Valor is usually something a clerk writes down 6 months after the shooting stops. But the real acts of bravery, the ones that keep you breathing, happen in the dark. They happen when you decide to cut off a limb to save the body. It is a field amputation. It is messy. It is loud. It is the hardest thing a human being can ever do. To look at the person who gave you life and tell them no more. To look at a brother and see nothing but a predator. But if you do it, if you are cold enough and sharp enough to sever that tie, you find something on the other side. It is a medal no general will ever pin on your uniform. You have to do it yourself. You have to stand in your own kitchen, in the quiet, and recognize that you are the only person who is ever coming to save you. My uniform is in the closet, pressed to a razor edge. My boots are shined until they reflect the light. I am a major in the United States Army. But the title that matters is the one I wrote for myself in that ballroom in Ohio. The one that says I am no longer a ghost. I am the one who holds the line. I hear the phone buzz once on the granite, a short, sharp vibration. I do not look at it. I do not wonder who it is. The answer doesn't change the mission. The kitchen is quiet again. I finish my coffee and I stand up. I have a new deployment, and this time I am fighting for someone worth the sacrifice.